Well, hello, and welcome once again to another edition of Pray on This. I'm your host, John Pray, and before we get started, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Today, Federal Budget 2023. What a difference 5 days can make. Last Thursday, I was not fully happy. I believe that the progressive conservative Doug Ford government of Ontario could have made life a little more affordable by slicing 1% off their portion of the harmonized sales tax, cutting it from 13% to 12% without undue financial pressure on the government. But overall, I was happy. They did actual investments in infrastructure projects, and they have a pathway to a balanced budget and economic prosperity. Yesterday, Justin Trudeau's finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, stood in the House and delivered what she called a fiscally restrained budget. I know for sure that this is a very intelligent woman, and she may speak 5 languages, have a master's in journalism, a BA in Russian studies, and she is a Rhodes Scholar. But she wouldn't understand or recognize finances, an economy, or fiscal restraint if it came up and slapped her in the face with a large fish. She talked about investment she's making into the green economy, green technology, and she had to do it because of the USA's Inflation Reduction Plan. What she really did was slow Canada's economic growth to a snail's pace crawl. She talked about a dental care program that now costs $13 billion a year to help less than 1 million Canadians. I know she said it's for children and seniors, but read the fine print. It's for the lowest income children and seniors, and over 85% will not qualify. And it is still not the federal government's lane. Health care, which dental care is part of, is provincial jurisdiction. Ms. Freeland talked about cutting $7 billion of waste from the government's budget over the next 5 years and cutting the amount spent on consultants. That she should do. The civil service is 28% larger since the Liberals took office. But even with the growth in government manpower, the amount of work given to and money spent on consultants is up 100%. We all know our services are not 128% better. If anything, they are substantially worse. She spoke about how they still have Canadians' backs with a one-time just under $500 grocery rebate. So in Canada, now the federal government has screwed up the economy so bad they have to give 11 million Canadians money just to buy food. She also gave those of us who enjoy the occasional beer, glass of wine, or spirits a break by only raising the taxes on booze 2%, not 6.3%. However, it is what Freeland didn't talk about that is truly terrifying. The fact that interest rates are no longer cheap. Borrowing money doesn't make the sense it did just 4 years ago. But she still borrowed and spent $71 billion in new spending. $40.2 billion of that is deficit finance. And she no longer has a contingency fund of $28 billion, as she used that to bring down what would have been her massive deficit to a modest $40 billion, not $70. She glossed over that the deficit is $9.8 billion higher than she predicted just 5 months ago, and she had to use the almost $30 billion rainy day fund to do that. Ms. Freeland also glossed over the fiscal anchor that the Liberals have tried to justify all their spending with. That is the critical debt to gross domestic product ratio that they have maintained at 1.4%. Well, by the end of this fiscal year, it will be at 1.9%. The biggest disappointment in the budget was not even the new staggering debt total of $1.2 trillion, which, by the way, equals $32,000 for every man, woman, and child in Canada. No, it's the fact that the budget, which she projected out over the next 5 years, never, not once, mentioned a balanced budget. Deficits are now structural in Canada. As a matter of fact, the Liberal government of Justin Trudeau plans to add an additional $150 billion to our debt over the next 5 years. That's if our revenues hold at current levels, which, with a recession, they will not. The Trudeau Liberals have taken this country from a balanced budget and shrinking debt to a structural deficit in 8 years, only half the time it took his dad, Pierre. One that has to spend almost $3 billion a year just to try and help its people feed and house themselves. With all this doom and gloom, I have not even spoken yet of the huge elephant in the room or the obvious. In 3 days' time, on the 1st of April, the carbon tax will rise. It will add an extra 14 cents to a liter of gasoline, 14 cents to a liter of diesel fuel. It will raise the cost of a cubic meter of natural gas 12 cents and will now affect all Canadians except those special people of Quebec, as the federal Liberal government imposes their full carbon tax on Atlantic Canada. Get ready down there in the east. You're going to love it. However, Quebec, the Prime Minister's home province, will continue with their cap and trade system, which Justin will never touch, out of fear he will make Quebec angry. Quebecers will be paying after Saturday 6 cents a liter less for fuel and 8 cents a cubic meter less for natural gas. For those who love the Liberal government, or if you're a senior or a lower to moderate income Canadian, if you think the grocery rebate or the dental care will help you, if you qualify, and that's a big if, you're getting very, very short-term gain, about a month of help for this government's lifespan of pain. The increase in the carbon tax plus an extra $3 billion of government cash directly into the economy will increase inflation by 2 to 2.5%, not to mention the other $69 billion of new spending, which in turn will force the Bank of Canada again to raise interest rates to fight rising inflation. For those who think Trudeau cares about you, well, you're wrong. What he cares about is staying in power. He proved that yesterday. In case you missed the grinning face of Jagmeet Singh, this budget is an NDP socialist, financially illiterate budget. For those of you who think that this is better than what the Conservatives would do, I want to point out 3 things to you. In the last 8 years, the gross domestic product of this country has been in a steady decline. At no other time in our history since 1931, when we started to measure and record GDP, has it declined for 8 straight years. Not the Great Depression, not World War II, not the energy crisis of the 70s, the massive recession of the early 80s, the tech crash of the 1990s, or the housing bubble of the early 2000s. Never has it done what it's doing now. I know, COVID. Yet, GDP started to shrink in the 3rd quarter of 2015-2016 fiscal year, long before COVID, and almost immediately after Justin Trudeau took office. That is because of the massive change in government policy, the war he has waged on our resource sector, and his socialist budgets. The second is that 8 years ago, for Justin Trudeau's full first term, we borrowed $100 billion. We didn't need to stimulate our economy. It was for a wish list. I'll forgive him the $275 billion he borrowed during COVID to keep this country going. That was smart. But since COVID and during it, up to and including yesterday, he so far has borrowed $230 billion just to pay the bills. He has added so much debt and cost so much economic activity that for the next 5 years and beyond, if we continue to elect this financially illiterate bunch, we will have to borrow at minimum $25 billion a year just to pay our civil servants, our health care, and to protect our borders. The third is what the great Margaret Thatcher said. Socialism is incredibly wonderful until we run out of other people's money to pay for it. There are three organizations who will look very, very closely at this budget and the economic dog's breakfast that it is. I pray to God they don't, but if they decide to come calling, one of two things will happen. They will downgrade our AAA plus credit rating, making our dollar worth less money, and our interest rates will have to go higher to compensate. Then we will have to borrow $30 to $40 billion a year to pay our bills if we're even allowed to borrow more money. Those organizations are Moody's, Standard & Poor, and Fitch Ratings. This budget and the move away from even thinking of a balanced budget, as well as the growing debt to gross domestic product ratio, could very well cost us our AAA plus credit status. Did I hear someone say Greece? I know. For those of you who have no training in economics, what I just said may be word salad to you. So I'm going to put it in simple terms we can all relate to. In 2015, I would like you to think of Canada as an average family with 2 late model cars, a home, and nice furniture, with a modest ratio of bills. That had a financially cautious person in charge. However, in the fall of 2015, a younger, more reckless, less experienced man replaced the older, more experienced, financially cautious man. And he looked around and said this house is nice, but it hasn't been updated. The cars are getting a little high in kilometers, and it would be nice to have all new furniture. What the hell? Interest rates are cheap. Let's renovate, buy 2 new luxury cars, and all new furniture. Oh, by the way, the family business that is our main source of money, I find it incredibly dirty. I don't like it. So I'm giving up all of that secure income to chase what is a dream that doesn't currently exist, but it will one day. Now, after 8 years, all the renovations that were poorly done and without inspection are causing a lot of issues. They are falling apart. The cars are lemons, hard to refuel, and could catch fire with no warning. The furniture is falling apart and showing the kids how to chase their dreams instead of hard work. Well, we have to support them now. Even though our income has fallen to the point we are borrowing to buy groceries, pay our bills, and our mortgage, which is more than double what it was 8 years ago in principal, and the interest rates are 16 times higher. Interest rates are measured by quarter points. Our credit cards would be maxed, but so far we've been able to convince the banks to up the limits. It's the only thing that's keeping us from losing everything. How long can you go before you would have to file for bankruptcy if you were this family? That's what 8 years of Justin Trudeau has brought us. I have seen the polls. I have studied the data. This budget will resonate with extremely low-income voters, yet it will keep you in poverty. The cult of Trudeau disciples that will support Justin even if he murdered the pet dog in front of them? Well, they're a cult who worship Trudeau like a god, so he has their support. And for some reason, this will score major points with baby boomer women. To which I must ask, is it all about you? I get the support from low income. If you're starving and a person feeds you, they have your loyalty. I understand the "I've always voted Liberal and I always will" crowd. However, I do not mean to be rude or cruel to the older women. However, your generation is 2 years from all being past 65. The biggest group of you are already in your 70s, approaching 80s. It's time for you to ask yourself what you're leaving behind. Your continued support of this man, who I do admit is attractive, has nice hair and is charming, whom you had romantic fantasies about his father, and now the son is an empty suit with zero competence or accomplishments. It begs to question, just how much do you hate your children, Generation X, your grandchildren, the millennials, and your great-grandchildren, Generation Z? My mom, who I love dearly, will still support Justin Trudeau. When I tell her my youngest grandson, Theodore, who turns 2 in a couple of months, will be suffering the Trudeau effect into his late 30s, just as I suffered the original Trudeau effect the first 35 years of my adult life, she paused and asked, "How's that my fault?" The answer made her truly think. Mom, it's your fault because you and your friends voted for Pierre Trudeau in 1968, 72, 74, 79, and 1980. Then in 1984 and for the next 1984 and the next 31 years, although I didn't always agree with your choices, you voted with your head, based on the party and the leader's competency, right up to 2015, and then again in 2019 and 2021, when you again voted with your hearts and your dreams. Years from now, someone will write a book about how to destroy a country's economic prosperity and put in place economic policies on how to stop economic growth. It will be called the Trudeau Years, Part 1, 1968 to 1983, Part 2, 2015 to 20... God, I hope it ends soon. For those of us who work hard, have dreams, that hard work will pay off and lead to economic prosperity for ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren. The last two numbers of Part 2, we will dream, say 23, hope and pray, 24, and in the name of all that is holy and God's mercy, worst case, we'll say 25. The 8 to 10-year nightmare that has been the Trudeau Liberals Part 2 cannot end soon enough, and we truly hope that Ella Grace, Xavier, or Hadrian Trudeau have no political ambitions. This country couldn't take a Trudeau trilogy. That, as always, is Pray on This. Once again, I'm your host, John Pray. Hit that like and subscribe button. Turn on notifications. I'll be back either later today or tomorrow to talk about Joe Biden's visit last week and also Chinese election interference and what happens over the next 2-week break for Parliament. Have a great day.